Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Very warm welcome to you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrea Jankrofer. I'm Director and Head of Africa for the Women in Marketing organisation. WiM Women in Marketing is a global network of senior professionals dedicated to educate, inspire, connect and recognise women in marketing, advertising and communication fields. We started out in 2004, so it's been 20 years now as part of the Chartered Institute of Marketing in the UK. And we then developed into a standalone organisation, which is a social enterprise. And we've grown considerably since 2004. And I launched Women in Marketing Africa at the Loeries in South Africa in 2018. So at WiM, we're dedicated to advancing gender equality and amplifying the creative talent and leadership in Africa's marketing and creative sectors. We drive change by creating opportunities for women to excel at the senior levels of marketing, advertising, and communications through our program of workshops, events, and collaborations. Our vision is to position Africa as a global leader in creative innovation, championing gender equality, diversity, inclusion every step of the way. I want to thank our panelists who have taken time out of their busy schedules to join this conversation, be part of it. And I'm sure those in the audience and those who may watch later really appreciate you contributing to this conversation. Huge thank you also to our partners, Unstereotype Alliance and Kantar. WiM Africa is an ally member of the Unstereotype Alliance South Africa chapter. Convened by UN Women, the Unstereotype Alliance is an initiative that seeks to eradicate harmful gender-based stereotypes in all media, advertising, content. With its partners, members, allies, and national chapters, the Unstereotype Alliance seeks to collectively use the advertising industry as a force for good to drive positive change all over the world. Thanks also to Kantar, who supported us with insights to facilitate this conversation. So now on to Real Talk. So this discussion series was born out of some personal conversations over the COVID period in 2020. The conversations were focused on the impact the pandemic had on women experiencing overwhelm and frustration as a result of the additional pressures and expectations put on them over the lockdown period. The conversation has moved on since then. However, gender inequalities still persist through all facets of our lives. So this is the fourth of the Real Talk series conversations. The first focused on women in tech marketing, the second on female founders, and for the third, we brought men to the table, all senior industry leaders, to hear their perspectives on gender equality in the workplace. You can watch recordings of all the discussions on the Women in Marketing Africa YouTube channel. So today's Real Talk conversation centers on the experiences of female creative leaders, and we have an amazing panel of women in the creative space, all trailblazers in their respective fields, to kind of engage in this conversation. I'll leave our fantastic moderator Cynthia Torto, who's a WiM Africa advisor and global creative lead at Shell, to set the scene and introduce the panelists. But before I do that, I want to congratulate Cynthia and Yaboatin, who just 2 weeks ago were awarded at the Global Women in Marketing Awards. Such a fantastic achievement. So well done to you both. I just had to get that in there. So I'm going to hand over to Cynthia now, who's going to take off in the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea, and thanks for putting this together. I'm so excited to talk to fellow colleagues from across the continent. We've got representation from Nigeria, South Africa, and Ghana on this call. Always excited. So thank you, Kabisen, Yar, and Nena for joining us on this panel today. So as Andrea explained at the beginning, today we're going to explore the experiences of African women in the creative industry. And whilst there's so much to celebrate, there's still some ongoing challenges. Andrea mentioned one of our sponsors is Kantar, and one of the interesting facts that they came out with is that 88% of young female creatives feel they lack role models, and 70% have never worked with a female creative director, which is diabolical. And we've got some amazing examples of great female creative directors here, so I'm really excited to pick your brains about that. So we're going to explore some key things around representation, freelancing, leadership. And also, it's great having these conversations, but I love it when we've got key takeouts. So we're going to look at what can we do collectively to move things along when it comes to gender equality. So before we dive into today's discussions, I'd like to give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves. And we'll also use this opportunity to learn more about their journeys and hear about defining moments. So I'll open up by asking each of you to briefly introduce yourself and share one defining moment in your career that has shaped your perspective on gender equality in the creative industry. And I'm going to use nepotism here and go to my fellow Ghanaian and go to Yabwaki with that question first. Yeah, remember, this is real talk, so we don't want any textbook answers. Just tell us the truth. Go on, what was that that defining moment, whilst you're introducing yourself?
So why did I have this feeling that you're going to come first? So anyway, so yeah, obviously I'm in Ghana. I run an agency called the Storytellers. We're an unconventional ad agency that believes in telling stories with our brands, basically, and enriching brands through storytelling. That's what we do. And the MD and the Chief Creative Officer. So I like to tell a story about something that really, really happened to me, okay? So this is in 2015, I was made a creative director, and I was first female creative director within the group. And we're about, I don't know, 11 men in the room. And I went for my first session, and this was in Kenya. And when we went for the session, it was only men talking, and this is the first time I had to sit with all these guys and everybody was talking, and I felt like nobody could hear me. I was just in my little corner, minding my business. I tried to speak, I'm like shy. And then there was a time where there was a brief, and this brief was for a female hair product, and they had to they didn't know what to do, and they're like, oh, let's get y'all in the room. I was like, yes, me. This is when my voice was going to be heard. And that was the first I actually, got to speak, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, she's actually brilliant. And we were bouncing off ideas and everything. And it just showed that, you have to work together, and that's in the, collaboration. And that was my first defining moment. And then also, apart from the fact that it was for a woman's product, for me, it was a defining moment where, you have to be confident, and you have to speak and let everyone hear your voice. So don't be scared in the room. So it wasn't a matter of, here I am raw, but it was here, listen to me as well, and don't be scared. So, and it was good. It was actually a good balance. So that was one defining moment for me in my career as a creative director. So yeah.
And love to, we'll dig in a bit more around that experience as we go through the questions. Let me go to Kabisen next. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I have so many familiar stories. Sorry. I have my little kid typing in here. As what Yaz told. Well, first of all, I'm Kabisen. Yeah, cool. That's good. Okay. Sorry.
That's
anyway.
Real life.
Yeah.
My apologies. I thought it was a great idea to take this meeting in my home office. Obviously, really not great. But yeah, I'm Kabisen. I've been running our agency, Think Creative Africa, for the past 8 years now in Johannesburg, South Africa, and really having a time of it, telling women's stories and trying to kind of break these strange associations, whether it's that women cannot participate or that they can participate only when it has to do with women's products, like you said, when they invited you here. We've tried to basically change the status quo by taking on accounts that necessarily don't necessarily relate to us being women, but just us being really great, sharp, creative minds, while simultaneously, when we do have the accounts that relate to being women, making sure that representation is a lot more relatable than what we saw when we were growing up. We have a number of brands that are in the beauty space, and of course, beauty is always so contentious in advertising. To make matters even deeper, we represent 3 natural ethnic hair care brands in the SADC region, just doing their marketing and brand. And it's been such a journey. I think that's actually one of the defining moments. Is we had a brand, I don't want to name and shame my client now, but they were in such disrepute because they had gone out into a market where they compared ethnic hair with Caucasian hair and kind of shown the ethnic hair as like brittle. They had fairly outdated imagery, but what I appreciate is they had the presence of mind to go out there and find the right voice, the right partners. They brought us to pitch. We won the account, and we've been working together ever since to make sure that that image is representative. And I think until then, it just never occurred to them to ask women. And I think when we were in those discussions initially, they said, we actually never thought, what about a female-led agency? And that was one of the defining moments for me, having had many others preceding that. But I think just the idea that there are so many women-led companies across the continent is encouraging, because I think that's the only way that things will shift.
Yeah, in Africa, it's women that tend to drive the economy as well. So it's a shame to see us not further forward within the space. And last but not least, Nena, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm Nena. I am co-founder and executive director of strategy and innovation for Yellow Brick Road. We're a full-service comms agency in Lagos. But I've been doing this for 27 years. And so my story actually isn't even an African one. It's from much earlier in my career in New York. And so when I worked at McCann, and I'm a strategist, and then I became a creative director, and then I went back to being a strategist. I have sort of like an interesting perspective on this. But my partner and my planning partner and I were young strategists, and we were kind of bored with what we were doing. So as you do when you're young, we're like, let's pitch something. So we pitched starting a practice group, and management said yes and gave us a bunch of money. But then they had to promote us because you can't have your group if you don't have a vice president title. And in the kind of process of the promotion, I found out that my partner, who was the same level as me, had the same experience as me, was doing the same work as me, and I might have been the smarter one of the pair, depending on who you're asking, was making significantly more money than me, significantly more money than me. And it had never occurred to me to ask how much money anybody was making. And when I asked, why does he make so much more money than me? Everyone said, well, it's all the salaries based on the negotiation. I'm like, but you must have offered him something different to start, because, right, that's not a negotiation thing. He started out at a different number. And I just realized that despite the fact that across the agency, my reviews were great, people loved me, people were always pulling me into things, the business clearly didn't value me as much as they did my partner, simply because that's how a company, right? It's like how much you pay is directly related to how much you value someone. And so what it taught me, one, is to always ask what everybody's making, and to be unapologetic about asking for my value. And if you're not willing to pay, it's okay. Not everybody can afford me. And that's perfectly okay.
You've touched upon one of my favorite topics, which is money. We're going to dig into pay and value later on. But before we get into that, and for the audience, please feel free to drop some questions in the chat. We're going to come to your questions towards the end of the panel discussion. But I want to start by understanding the broader landscape that we're in when it comes to gender equality, particularly in Africa. Africa has been, rising for many years now. It's being seen as a place that represents, huge opportunities, but there's still unique challenges that face women in the creative industry. So I want to deep dive into that a bit and maybe back to you, Nena. What do you think are the biggest challenge for African women in the creative economy at the moment?
I think it's the same challenge that African women face in any kind of professional or work situation. So what we see is that when we're starting out, right? At entry level, it's usually 50-50. And then as you go up, right, the women start to fall away. So by the time you get to leadership, there's very few women in the room. And it happens for a couple of reasons, right? It happens primarily because we live on a continent where women are still very much encouraged to get married and have children. And when you get, and actually people, right? So men are also encouraged to get married and have children. But when a man gets married and has children, his expenses might increase, but that's really the only thing that happens for him, right? When a woman has children, her expenses increase, her career might stall, and her pay will stall. And so what we find, especially on the agency side, is that women, once they start having kids, and agency life is hectic, the hours are hectic, no one is like trying to listen to like you have to take your kids to go get vaccinated or your kid is sick or whatever. And before, now I think with flex work and remote work, it's created other opportunities. But before, if you had to be in an office from 8 to 6 or 8 to 10 or 8 to midnight, which a lot of agencies, that's how they run, how do you like negotiate that with your partner? How do you negotiate that with your mother and mother-in-law? Right? And so I think like the structural things of just the way that our families are set up and our social lives are set up make it really hard for women who choose to be married and have children to also perform professionally in those middle years, right? Because those are also the time when your kids are young and they need you all the time. And so men, right, they have the kids, but there's somebody else who's doing that work. And so they have like 100% of time and energy. And then on the other side, from the business side, often business leaders worry about women. I mean, there's a conversation that I have a co-founder, and he's a man. And early in our business, we had that conversation about, I was like, I don't want us to be an agency where girls or women are afraid to get pregnant. But his thing was like, you bring someone on, they get pregnant, they're out for 6 months, and then it's another 6 months of half work, And so business often looks at the risk of women as opposed to the reward. So I think that those are probably for me, it's when I talk to women, especially in that because it's in that those middle years that they tend to drop off. And it's usually because to reconcile, so the balance is just impossible, right? If you're working 60, 70, 80 hours a week and you've got 1 or 2 small people at home, it can become untenable. And if you don't have support from your job or from your family, it just becomes impossible.
Yeah. It's it's the whole perception that's been put on you. I mean, I haven't married and I don't have children, but I still get those. There's an expectation of how you should be as a woman in a business anyway, regardless of what your family status is. There'll still be something they project onto you that holds you back. Yeah. What's your experience of this? What would you say has been the biggest challenge for you or for women?
I couldn't agree with Nena anymore. So like she said exactly what it is. So first of all, when you are in Africa, you must either be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant. You being a creative is a joke. Like, what are you doing for yourself? So first of all, you are in that box. And then you are in this box where you're working in advertising. And like Nena mentioned, you're working all these hours, Sunday to Sunday, to midnight. They look at you as, what time do you have for your family? Because in Africa, the setting, family is important, especially for women. And with my experience, what I've experienced with this whole space is people, or should I say women who come into the advertising space, is like a stopgap. I don't know what I'm doing myself. So I come into advertising for a bit. And then when I figure it out, I'm gone. And by the time you get to a certain level, you realize that you don't even have enough women in that space to even look up to, or to, so you have this whole thing where you're not a serious person, you are in this space. And it's something that has gone on for a while. And I think we still have these challenges as well. Like family is so important. And I think we don't ask the right questions, as in, do you really want to have kids or not? Or is it just, this is what my family says? Like Cynthia, you mentioned, sometimes you can go through these sessions, questions with your family, when are you going to settle down? When are you going to do this? So it becomes this whole thing of which one is more important, you know? And for Africa, family is more important. So those of us who actually stay in here are like, you know, this is what we love to do and we're doing it. You get me? So I've experienced this whole thing of, yeah, you're still not married, you're not, what's it called? So you go through this whole thing. And yeah, it is a problem. It is a problem. I don't know how we can support each other through this whole thing where I don't know how to put it, but it is a very, very big challenge when it comes to women in the creative space. So it's like, okay, let me just figure out what I want to do, and when I'm done, I leave. And then you don't have enough women in there. So it's just a few of us that are still here. And it's actually refreshing to see another creative who is a creative leader who is a woman. So you can look up to that person and go, oh, I've seen somebody who looks like me, who can understand me, and, you know, guide you through. And it's not a death sentence. Like, we're still doing it and we're enjoying what we're doing and we're learning along the way. So it's us still being around and, you know, representing the women in the space and letting other women know it is okay. There's nothing wrong with you if you are a female in the creative space. We've all survived, we're still here, and you can do it too.
Right. And Kabuseng, coming to you, like what else could we do to support and elevate African women in the creative space that are struggling, perhaps?
Yeah, I think you was touching on it towards the end around seeing that other person, but I think community is one of the biggest things we can do for ourselves and each other. I think a lot of the time I've just needed an ear, right? Or I've just needed an example of just needed somebody to help me resolve an issue, untie a knot instead of cutting the whole thing. And a lot of the time women don't have that. So, I mean, now in South Africa, we've just started an organization called Open Chair. So we're trying to resolve this issue of why women are leaving for various things. So if you're leaving because there's harassment in the workplace, which is very real, what can we do about that? If you're leaving because you don't feel like your potential is being seen and nurtured, what can we do about that? If you're leaving because you feel like your ideas don't get as much attention, etc., we can get in community, and the format is just getting women together, talking through these issues, setting up actual structures that can help us get around these things. And I think this should be kind of continent-wide, if possible. Like, Women in Marketing is a great forum for this. And I really believe in community as a way to at least galvanize some kind of action. And I think the other thing that we can do is maybe advocate for each other a lot more. So if I'm in a room and I have a lot of men around me, and I know so many talented women who are right to join our supply chain, to join our team, I need to kind of be like a broken record in that room. And I know it's another burden on us again, right? Like, you already have to have the career, have the family, stand out in the organization and in the industry, and then advocate for other women. I know it's like a lot, but really I think it's probably going to come from us. So finding those people who are willing to be allies and a voice with you in a room, but making sure that you are advocating and saying, I think Cynthia would be fabulous for this role. She's been ready for years. And I think that she'd change this business, or she'd change this organization. Because men advocate for each other nonstop. Like, it's actually not even at the strategic level for them. It's at a social level. Just talking about how great another man is. It's at golf, it's at the bar, it's at somebody's wedding, it's in the boardroom. And I think we could use like a lot more advocacy in our community, just to make sure we bring each other closer, and there's like momentum in our careers. I've got a lot more to say on the topic, but I'll stop there.
Well, let's not go away from you, because I love what you said about community and advocacy. It's all about sponsorship. It's all in that arena of sponsorship and mentorship. And I wonder if you could share with us an experience of mentorship for you. Like, who's been a great mentor for you, and what did that look like?
Yeah, I've had such incredible mentors, and I cannot stop talking about this. So we talked a little bit when we did our meeting by ourselves about Dr. Sizegele Marukule, who's like quite a figure, especially in the Southern African marketing space. But I think generally she's quite well known, strategic thinker and industry lead. And I think what she did taught me what to do next for other women, which is put you in the conversation. if there's any kind of feedback that she believes would help us grow, no matter how difficult, picking up the phone and saying, I heard your services sucked that time. Or I heard you guys were fantastic, and I think you should talk more about it in the press, for example. And making sure that when there are opportunities, just making us aware of them, also being available for just a heart-to-heart. We've got this pitch, we don't know if we're ready, we don't know if we've got the chops. Can you give us a real reading? Can you introduce us to somebody? Just being that woman. I'm singling her out, but I've had so many of those types of women, which a lot of the time when I say this, I hear like a lot of negative feedback. Oh, I've never had a woman mentor me. Oh, actually in my career, women have held me down, etc. But I think the more we learn from each other to be that way, we can actually also kill the stigma around women don't work well together. Because I think men made that up as a rumor to keep us apart. And so I really believe in the idea that it's mentorship, and you touched on it, sponsorship. So not just, you know, me hanging out with you and making you feel good about your prospects, but actually mentioning you at those important times, working with you where I can. So I'm creating that solid network. Yeah.
Brilliant. Nana, how about you? Who's been a mentor to you?
So I mean, so it's interesting because I think, you know, I've been incredibly lucky through my whole career, that I started my career working for a series of amazing women. And when I go back to Nigeria, I found a circle. And I think rather than mentors, actually, what has been really helpful for me has been a peer group. Because yes, mentors are great, and yes, sponsors are great, and you need someone who's going to get you in the conversation and get you in the door and get you in the room. But in the work of it, having peers, having people who were either in the agency or in the, you know, at the client or just in the industry, who I could call and just be like, babe, this thing, I don't know how I'm going to do it, right? And have someone who would just like sit me down, talk me off the cliff, bring me cake if I needed it. And so I think just what you were saying, I think that there is this story that women don't work well together, that we pull each other down, but that's not been my experience. My experience has been overwhelmingly that when I reach out to women, they respond. Now, what I find is that women, because we believe that women don't work well together, sometimes women are a little reticent, right? Because they've heard all the stories and maybe they've had a couple of experiences, but I'm always like, look, I'm just gonna try. The worst they can say is no, but I call it my sister circle. I have a sister circle that has people in the industry, people outside of the industry, and it literally has kept me sane. They also, as we've gotten more senior, they put me up for jobs, they send opportunities my way. When they hear something about me or the agency somewhere else, they'll call me and be like, this person was talking smack about you. I think, yes, especially when you're starting out, sponsors are great, mentors are great, but even in the beginning, build yourself a strong network of peers, because you will grow up together. And when you guys sit in, and also because you're going through it together, I found that I probably stayed in the industry much longer because I had a peer group. And so on the days when I was like, I cannot do this thing, 1 more hour, I must go. Somebody was like, okay, babe, come. Okay, so just wait. And let's see how we're gonna do it. And I think that peer group has been so important to my own development.
Awesome.
I don't know if there's such a thing as a peer mentor, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to say you guys are all inspirations for me, because you've managed to make that leap away from the crack of a regular pay salary to freelancing and consultancy. So yeah, let's find out a bit more about that. Like, let me go to you, Yar, because you set up your own agency. It's doing really well. Like, what challenges did you face moving away from the corporate world, working with major brands, to doing your own thing as a woman?
It wasn't easy. That's one. So first of all, I'm a creative. And so when I say I'm a creative, I did not know the business side of it. It was one of those things where I just got up and like, you know what? I'm going to do my own thing. I'm just going to be designing and this and that. You know, you have that whole, idea. And then you start working and you realize oops, I don't know anything about the business. You don't even know how to bill. You don't know how to, it's been really, really, really tough. And then you realize that there's so much that goes into it. And this is where you you need to start learning about like the business side of things, the financial side of things, even doing your client servicing. Like it's not been easy. It took a while. You go through sessions where how are you treating your team, how you start off as a freelancer just by yourself, and then there's like, okay, I'll get 1 or 2 people, and then you're focusing more on, because I'm a creative, I'm looking at the work, just the work has to be done, this and that. But how are you even connecting with your clients? That's a whole different thing. How are you billing? How are you doing your taxes? It's not been an easy journey, and we're still learning along the way. Yeah, so that's what it's been. It's not been an easy road, but a day at a time. And then I think earlier, just as we're speaking, before everything started, I was talking about how the industry is even changing, how you evolving as a business. What are you doing as a business? There's so much that goes into it. So for us, what I would say is just keeping up to date with whatever is happening in the industry, especially in Africa and the world. The world is getting smaller and smaller. How are you going to keep up with the world? It's not how you keeping up in your little corner in Ghana. How are you keeping up with Nigeria? How are you keeping up with South Africa, with Kenya? The world has become this small, so you have to keep evolving and keeping up to date with every single thing that's happening. So that's what it's been for us. And moving from advertising, well, we haven't moved completely. We're doing films, we're doing experiential, you're doing so many different things, because you have to keep learning and keeping the industry, sorry, your business, how should I say, relevant. That's what it is. Yeah, so that's what it's been for us.
And so maybe Kabizem, if I go to you, how do you keep yourself relevant? How do you market yourself better as a woman in this competitive environment that Yas just described?
Yeah, I mean, and a lot goes into it, as she says. There's building your personal profile as a leader in the industry and making sure you're saying the right things, you're doing the right type of work, and you have the right relationships. And that can be sort of a full-time job of its own, in a sense, just looking after your own personal profile, and failing which, you kind of become irrelevant very quickly, because, I mean, the business is so keen to see women as irrelevant sometimes, that if you don't actually maintain that brand around your acumen, it can be a little bit difficult. So there is managing that, which I'm constantly doing by upskilling myself, sharing my skills, sharing the work that I'm involved in, making sure that I'm actually also sharing on behalf of partners that I found that are amazing. I think collaborative storytelling can be quite powerful, because sometimes when it comes from you alone, it can feel like a bit of a sort of brag manifesto. But when you show the work that you've done as a group and the impact it's had, it can be a lot easier. And then on behalf of our business, which is an ongoing thing, they always say the cobbler's son has no shoes, but agencies are so bad at marketing themselves. And we haven't been, incredible at that either. I think we've sort of made sure we've got the right publicity around pieces of work we really believe represent us well. And that's been our strategy. So showing our evolution in terms of our output by showcasing the piece of work that we've done, whether it's a piece of work that uplifts a community from a brand you don't expect, of work that's tactical, that tackles an issue that's difficult to talk about, which we've done recently for the National Freedom Network, or even showing how do we weave in AI capabilities, African storytelling, into something that gives the world a perspective of what artificial intelligence can do creatively from our own perspective as Africans. So letting the work sort of tell those stories of evolution. I think we're better at that, but we haven't really gone out and said, look, we've evolved services, we've done this, we've done that, as well as I think we should often. But I think starting those conversations around what is an agency now, one of the things we've done in the last few years is launch a breast pump because 3 of us in the business became mothers consecutively, and we found that the pumps in our market were terrible. So we banded up together and we designed one. And we've been telling the story of how that's taught us so much about retail and allowed us to test out our ideas through advertising that product. And I think just allowing yourselves, as Yah was saying, to pivot and use the skills that you have in the business in all the ways that you can to remain relevant.
Yeah. Nena, are you tempted to come back to the dark side, come back to client side, or is it better for you?
No. So I think, I always say the thing about, and not no shade to people who are on client side, but what I love about being on the agency side is that you get to think about lots and lots of different things. And I have ADHD, so my brain, like, I like the dopamine up. I can think about credit cards and milk and condoms and, airtime in the same day, as opposed to I'm spending all of my time thinking about, the Sharpie. So no, client side, I spent a year doing it, and I was like, no, this is not the life for me. I do think that when the decision to go out on your own, so I've done it twice now. So Yellow Brick Road, obviously we started our own agency. And then when I left my business and started my small consultancy. And I think for me, what was interesting is that, and I don't know if it's an African thing or a general thing, but it was very much that people were not always supportive of my taking the risk. Right? Men are allowed to take risks. Men are supposed to take risks, right? Men are supposed to do the crazy thing and jump off the cliff and do the thing. And everybody kept saying, like, but you have, like, why don't you just like stay in the job? Like, what do you mean? Because there is a sense that as a woman, there's a level of stability that you're supposed to provide to the world, I guess.
Yeah.
But also, right, like you're supposed to be safe and secure, and like, why would you just? I remember, when I made the decision to step back from my VR, and so I was talking to people about it. I was like, okay, one, I'm panicking because like I've spent 12 years of building this thing, and I'm going to leave it, and that was terrifying. And then also, what am I going to do? Because I didn't want to go do exactly the same thing, and do I even have any skills? Will anybody pay me for anything? Right. So there's all of that doubt that we have, despite I've got 20 years of experience, but I'm still like, nobody will hire me. But people kept saying, but why would you risk it? And in the end, I was like, well, why wouldn't I? So I think what I would say to anybody who's thinking about doing it is what my sister said to me, which is that you are much better prepared and have much greater capacity than the men that are doing it like every minute. And the worst that you can do is fail. And then you can always go back and get a job, right? Like corporate isn't disappearing in 6 months or a year. And so really it was learning to get comfortable with the risk and the fear and the insecurity. And learning to tell my anxiety to sit down and be quiet. Because you just gotta get things done.
Okay. I'm convinced. I was on the fence about going freelance, but hearing you all speak,
I
need to join you.
Do it.
Yeah. So let's move on to my favorite topic, as I mentioned before, money. So in the UK, there's a law where you have to publish the gender pay gap in each corporate. And I'm pretty sure there's no law like that in Africa or anywhere. But we all know there's a difference in gap. So let's explore that. Whose experience? I think you mentioned it. Was it you that mentioned a male colleague that was? No, it was you, Nena. A male colleague. Yeah. Let's go back and could you just go over how you handle that, finding out that someone's being paid significantly more and you're doing the same job, if not more than that person?
So I happened to be twice. So once that happened very early in my career, but then, when I came back to Nigeria and I was working at a very senior level, and I had 2 jobs, right? I was director of strategy, and then we lost our creative director, and then I was now then director of creative director. So I had 2 jobs that I was doing full time. And the person who become my business partner, I just happened to be seeing, right? Because I knew how much money I made, but if I somehow had never seen his payslip, and I looked at it and I was really like, why do you make more money than me? And he was like, well, because the tax, like, no, but do you think that you provide more, like this much more value to the business than I do? Because for me, that's it, right? Like compensation is a reflection of value. And so for me, it was very, and I think I was senior enough at that point. So for me, the conversation was, there's two options, right? Either you catch me up, or we have a conversation about where I go next. But that determination came because it happened to me really early in my career. And I promised myself I was never going to do it again. And then I found myself in the same situation. And I just, you must always be careful. You must always check. Because it's not always that the other person is like mean or devious or whatever. There's a reason that it's a bias. It's there. It's ingrained. There is, especially in this part of the world, a belief that if you are a man, you should earn more because you have greater responsibilities or you command whatever. And so just in our agency, it's policy, actually, that at every level, it's not like you get paid what you get paid and we have a band. And I think we probably swing a little bit more in the other way, to be honest, right? When one of your co-founders is a woman, I'm just like, no, girls must be paid. So I think the thing, and I belong to an organization called African Women on Board. And this is part of the work that they do, which is really how do we begin to get, especially large enterprise, to commit to pay equity. Because you have to force it. It's not going to happen organically, right? It's 2024. If it hasn't happened by now, it's not going to happen organically. And so we really need to lobby and advocate and make it policy, make it, get companies to sign on to charters. We've got to push. Because what I don't want is for the next generation of young women coming up after me to be having this conversation that I'm having. Again, right? Like I feel like you can make your own mistakes and find your own battles, but let it not be the ones that I fought and let it not be the mistakes that I made. And so I think for people in leadership, so we have to begin to really also it's not just about we deserve equal pay, but we should also need to really, because these are business people making business decisions, make the business case for women. And the research is there, right? The research is there that says that if you have women in decision making, your business does better. The research is there everywhere in the world. Like female founders do better, female leaders make better decisions. Companies that have, high female participation at a senior level make more money. Right? There's a perspective that we bring. There is a different way of problem solving. We collaborate in different kinds of ways. And so it's a valuable perspective to the business. I think that's the argument that we need to make. It's not about being nice or charity or you should. It's actually because it's healthy for your business. And especially in the creative sector, so many young women leave the agency and go client side for specifically this reason. Because they want to make more money because the pay's not great. Right? So I think, and also because we know, right, that the women are also dealing with other issues. So if you want to keep the women who are going to help your business, you've got to make the commitment to pay them as well. And then also think about what are the other things that you need to do to make it easier for them to perform at the level that you require.
Such wonderful points, and also wonderful for me because you helped me on to the next section, which is around inclusive leadership. You've made my transition to the next question quite easy. So obviously leadership plays a key role in inclusivity and driving change. Kabisen, I want to go to you and just talk about maybe some examples where you've seen inclusive leadership and diversity positively influence the success of branding and advertising. Have you had that experience?
I actually have. I think what's important to note is there aren't even, especially in our region, the right number of case studies for us to refer to. And so it becomes the research is there and everything, but business often rejects data and goes for anecdotal. And we don't have the anecdotes to back us because, it hasn't really been done as much as it needs to. But I have. We actually, as an agency, had a client where the full team was pretty much women. And we managed to, with our predominantly female-led business, change the trajectory of one of the most struggling brands in that ecosystem by really tapping into what the customer needs and who they are. I think somebody mentioned it earlier that we drive economic growth in this continent. I think it was, in South Africa, the key household shopper, and probably in so many other countries, is a woman, right? She's the one who's making the decision around pretty much everything that exists in the households, down to the vehicles that are in the garage. But, business hasn't taken the time to actually understand what her needs are and what drives her to purchase. And I think having taken the time to really research our clients, not making assumptions, meeting them where they are now, again, not making assumptions that they're still where they were 5 years ago when the research said they didn't care about automotive, or when the research said they didn't participate in insurance or household financial decision making. Really understanding what are the key pillars that move them and bringing that into the campaign. And one of the examples I have is we developed a book of consumer wisdom around savings. So typically in South Africa, the savings culture is driven by banks pretty much wagging their fingers, telling people you need to save X% of your salary. And the feeling is, how can you relate to how much of my salary I need to save? You've never made what I make as a giant bank. The people in those halls have no idea how little money I have, and you're asking me to save 10%. And some ineffective advertising. And so we went to the women and we said, how are you saving? Because another woman who's looking for that kind of insight would believe you long before they believe an insurer and they believe a bank. And the kind of insight that we got from that project, some of the tricks I'm still doing, right? Because you learn so much from people who are in your situation rather than institutional knowledge. And I think being given the opportunity to work with a predominantly female team as a team of women in our agency, to just get to that insight that women don't believe you when you talk to them about financial wellness. They don't believe you can relate to their struggles, but they do believe each other. And they do have good ideas around how to build wealth. We've just never asked them. That was one of the most successful campaigns we had for that insurer. And I think there should be many more scenarios like that. We talk about data a lot as an industry and what to make of it, but when it comes to taking the data that we get about women and really looking at it honestly, somehow there's a lack of due diligence there. So, yeah.
Super. And let me come to you as a leader in the creative industries. What are the ways that you try to build in a culture of inclusivity with your teams that you work with?
Collaboration. That's what I do with my team, is about collaboration, because one of the things that I've noticed is, when you have your team and you always pick a particular person to always come along, right? It feels like there's this speciality thing going on over there. And when I do the collaboration with the team, it's like equal opportunities for everyone, because you must always kind of hear from everyone's perspective, especially working with campaigns and whatnot. You need that whole diverse, group of ideas coming in. And you don't really have, like we've been talking about all this while, you don't have a lot of women in the space anyways. So what you try to do is, I try to get them to speak and, give them that confidence, because at the end of the day, you always realize like maybe this guy's idea or the man's idea is better than mine. But it's like, no, let's all come together and let's all brainstorm together and let's all do things together. It makes them feel included in whatever we're coming up with. So in terms of leadership, you try to get everybody's ideas on board so everybody feels equal and there's no speciality going on. So I do a lot of collaboration with the team, and everybody comes together, let's do this together and put, the ideas together. So it's not one special person, which is maybe just the guys or the girls. So we're doing this together. It's good to start this early, then everybody knows my voice matters. So that's what I do when it comes to leadership of the team.
Thank you, thank you. So we're coming up towards the end of the session. So before we go to questions from the audience, a nice way to wrap up is to give some kind of key practical takeouts from the session. So I want to ask all of you, what advice would you give to a young woman that's starting out their career in the creative industry today? Nena, let me go to you first.
Gosh. I think I was like, don't run away, become a lawyer. No. I think I will give the advice that was some of the advice that I found really, really helpful. One is that you are much more prepared, much more capable than you give yourself credit for. If they've hired you, they didn't, unless you think that they're all stupid, they didn't make a mistake, they hired you for a reason, right? Right, they looked at your CV, you got the job, right? So you got the job, they hired you for what you have. So don't worry about should you be there, because they've already told you every paycheck, right, is affirmation that you can be there. 2, get good at your job. Because the truth is, sadly, right now, you will probably have to be better than the dudes. Get really good at your job. Get really, really good at your job. And then 3, make sure that everybody knows that you're good at your job. Toiling in obscurity is not the way to build a career. I know that, I'm a person where like I self-promotion is not my thing. Even things like this I do all the time are terrifying for me. Like my anxiety is through the roof right now. But you have to do it, right? You have to advocate for yourself in your career. So if you're doing work, make it visible. And then find a way to play the politics in your favor. Because the truth is, unless you're working for yourself, there's always politics, right? And you don't have to be backbiting, but you do have to understand who has influence, who has power, who is going to be helpful, and who is going to be a hindrance. And then figure out ways to navigate, right? Like have an understanding that it's more than just the work that you do, right? There is a social element, right? Because we're all people. So learn that early. I didn't do it early. And I wish that I had just paid more attention to the politics of it. Because even if you're not participating, it's important to understand how decisions are really made in your organization, because then you'll understand how to influence them. And the last thing is, find yourself support. Do not do this alone. Find women who are in your shoes. Find older women in your organization. Sometimes they're not even in the professional. I remember when I very first started, there was a woman and she was an admin assistant, but she was an older Black lady, and she just hipped me to everything about that business work, right? So I went into this big, traditional, very white, very male agency, and she was an admin assistant. But I was just always really nice to her. And so she was like, this is how you get things done. This is who this is. And so find people, right? Don't worry so much about title or seniority. Yes, it's good to get face time with the senior people, but find people who want to support you, who want to teach you.
Absolutely. Andrew, I think we need to speak to Kantar to do a study about why marketers hate marketing and PRing themselves, because I'm with you on that one. If I can get away with not being seen, I will.
We'll get Lee onto it.
Let me come to you. What's your advice for young ladies starting out in this career?
I don't think I can cover it better than Nena, because that was so solid. But I think on her last point around finding people, I think sometimes we worry, at least I did when I was young, that all the relationships need to be above. And there's so much power in lateral relationships as well. You mentioned this around finding a peer group, just making sure there are people there to keep you sane and keep you inspired and fire each other up. I think that's a piece of practical advice that can help. And then again, maybe I'm repeating a little bit of what Nena said, but speaking up for your work. I know we all hate it, but showing up with that LinkedIn post where you are extremely thrilled and honored to be selected for X or to have done it. It's super, super, super important, because your work will not speak for itself. And a lot of the time, unfortunately, others won't speak and say, well, this person was really critical in this project, especially if you're a woman. So share the work that you do. really, really important. Yeah.
Yeah, let me come to you lastly on this. What's your advice?
Embrace a growth mindset. As you're in this industry, like I mentioned earlier, it keeps evolving, it keeps changing. You need to embrace a growth mindset. You will learn along the way. If you keep, being in your little corner, you're not going to grow, and you become, I like to say this a lot, a dinosaur, very irrelevant. So you need to embrace a growth mindset, and you need to surround yourself with people who challenge you. You should surround yourself with people who challenge you. And also, it's okay to make mistakes. Don't think that it's perfect. It's not perfect. It's a journey. Make those mistakes, learn from the mistakes, and you get better at it. You get what I mean? So for me, it's always embrace a growth mindset. It's actually helped me. And I like to use myself as an experience, or as an example, I beg your pardon. So I started off as a designer, and because I wanted to learn and wanted to grow, you ask questions. How do you do this? How do you do that? And then you start learning. So I won't say after being a designer, I can still design, but then I was interested in strategy. So I'm not a perfect strategist, but I understand that. Even starting my business, you had to learn the business side of it as well. So it's growth, and that's how you develop and grow within the space. So always embrace a growth mindset. I always say that.
Awesome. Perfect timing as well, almost on the hour. Andrea, let me pass over to you. I think we've got some questions from the audience.
We do. We have Lee. I think it's harking back to running your organizations and how are you inclusive with your teams within your agencies. So Andrew's asking, how do you convince clients to do the same and be more inclusive? Anyone
will grab that one?
I think honestly, with clients are driven, like most people, are driven by self-interest, right? So you've got to show them what they have to gain. No one's gonna do it because it's the right thing. We all love the thing that we do. Nobody is interested in doing the right thing, right? So you've got to show them that it's in their, demonstrate how it's in their best interest. And the thing I found with clients overall is you've got to build trust, right? If you show them the result the first time and remind them, right, that you did this and it worked, because clients also will forget, right? They'll remember everything that went wrong, but they won't remember what went right. So demonstrate, reinforce, build that trust. And I think the big thing is to show, not tell.
Brilliant. Thank you. I've got a question, and it kind of picks up on something I think all the panelists said about your profile. So one of the things was speaking up for yourself, putting yourself forward, and it's something that none of us really enjoy doing, but it's a must. We need to do that. Can anyone or all of the panelists kind of share something that they've done that actually has helped them and put them ahead? Someone else has noticed something that they've talked about or done. For example, we had the Women in Marketing Awards a couple of weeks ago. Do award entries been shortlisted, winning awards? Can you kind of share your experiences of that, and has it actually helped you get ahead? Anyone?
Yeah, you're a big award winner. Why don't you take that one?
Yeah, why? I will say it does put a lot of spotlight on you. You get what I mean? I would say it has done that for me. So you get all these, I wouldn't say random, you get a lot of people reaching out to you. I need help with this, I need help with that. So yes, on some level, I say it does. It definitely does. And it kind of brings some credibility to what it's like, oh, this person must know what they're doing. Over the last 2 weeks, which tomorrow will be 2 weeks with Women in Marketing Awards, that's been different because it was not an award from Ghana. It was award like global. So you have a lot of messages in your inbox, people asking all these questions, and they need help, and they need, so it does give you that spotlight. And yeah, it does. Yeah.
Is there anything else, this is to everyone, that has helped you other than awards? I guess maybe speaking on panels or doing more speaking engagements. Yeah, just to give some advice to those people on the call, what they can, some things they can pick up and take forward in terms of creating more of a profile for themselves.
So I mean, I'm 27 years in, so I don't know how. Sorry, but I think in the beginning of my career, what I did do was to look for opportunities to speak in front of senior management within the agency. That was a really big agency, right? So, I worked in business development. So I started doing the briefing so that they would see me. And it wasn't like, when I look back on it now and I think, oh, this is how I did it. But it wasn't like at the time I was like, oh, super intentional. I was just like I'm not going to sit here and be ignored, right? And so I created opportunities for myself. Maybe 6 or 7 years ago now, I started my Instagram platform, The Barefoot Strategist. And I started it because actually somebody else said to me, because my everything is private, and everything is private. He's like, what is this private world? He said to me, like, you embody possibility for a young woman on this continent. Right, just the fact of you creates opportunities for her, and so I did it really to create a teaching platform. Right, so I talk about strategy and I talk about leadership, but it's interesting that it's not so much that it's gotten me through the door, but when I get a prospect, often there's someone who's like, oh, I saw the video or the thing or the post. So the Barefoot Strategist has actually become a bit of like almost like professional proofing for me. Mm-hmm. And it's especially because I'm useless, so I have a team, because like if it was just me, like nothing would happen. And so also I outsourced it because I was like, I'm really, so if you are really, really busy, do what we tell clients to do. Find someone else to do it. And they're great. And so, we go through the content, but they post and manage and everything, and I just have to show up and talk or whatever. And that has been really great. And it's also led to a lot more speaking opportunities, for some of which even actually pay. So that's pretty good.
Cool. Great.
I wanted to say on visibility and awards and speaking engagements, from our perspective as a business in our field, we do need that. I found that we do need that credibility, that stamp of approval of a particular award, whether it's Lions or regional award like Lurie's. I think this has weight in our region. Recently, we were ranked the #1 small agency in Africa, Middle East, and I think that brought a lot of attention around RFQs, which is really great, because that's where you want to be invited to agency record opportunities where clients hadn't considered you before. So it helps for that reason. But I also, somebody told me 2 things that really stuck with me. One is quite crude, but she said that you're too broke to not be visible. And, I do think she was saying it in jest, but I think the meaning behind that is if you want to create value for yourself, you do have to be visible. People have to know about you, and you've got to be top of mind. And then the other thing is all of these engagements are pixels in the picture. And that's always stuck with me, because I'll meet people professionally and they'll have a fairly good idea of what I do and what we're capable of. And that really helps the conversation along. And so all those little things might not like, oh, you won this award, now here's a tangible conversion, but just building that picture and forming the voice in the industry, I find to be quite useful. For us.
Brilliant, thank you. There is one, just last one, I think. Sangai in the chat says, hi, how did you overcome some challenges you faced and moved on positively? How did you pick yourself up from there? So I guess she's talking about disappointments or a bad situation in your career, and how have you moved on positively from that?
Maybe I can weigh in. We've had some account losses. So in the sort of 8-year run that we had just been picking up accounts. Like it was like it's a win and a growth and a win. And we hadn't had the experience of actually losing an account. And that has been quite difficult, I think, because you're kind of building on momentum of like these positive outcomes. But obviously in every business cycle, you do lose clients. And I think when you come to experience that when you're a small agency, the impact is actually quite large, because every single human being that's on the account and every single hour that you're billing to the account, all of those things are just so impactful. It's not like a client that's a drop in the ocean of a massive agency. And then those relationships, especially where we kind of couldn't figure out where it went wrong. We were just paid a performance bonus in the same year that they were terminating, and all of these other kind of positive cues. But ultimately, businesses move on for a variety of reasons. It's not always whether you're doing well, whether you're affordable enough. There can be other influences in the macro environment, and that's what we faced. And I think we had to, one, of course, pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off and go, okay, we've done all that we thought we could do. Our model is still great. Our ideas are still strong, even as, attested by these particular clients that are walking out. But I think what's important that we learned, we got some advice around one, change management. So how are we going to allow the team to kind of recover from this? So ourselves as leaders, you're able to get a lot of insight and somehow work through the wins and the losses differently, but the team can be quite affected. So for the first time, we actually had a consultant come in and help people manage through the process. There's going to be an account loss, people are going to shift to different accounts. We had to lose 2 or 3 people from our team and downsize a little bit. And just making sure that there's a professional in place to help people cope with the difficulty of that kind of fear of what's going to happen to my job. I've been working on this account for 3 years. I'm now going to move on to another thing. Do I have to now rebuild all the relationships there? And that was such a great idea. I think like bringing in a consultant to help you manage a difficult moment as a business hadn't occurred to us before in our growth. But I think some things are actually just better when you can support people adequately. And I think the team did feel that that was actually something we took really seriously. And I think people were able to say things to the consultants that they might not have been able to say to us. And all of those like moments of space to be held and given a second to process the change really made a big difference for us. I don't know if that answers the question, but
and I think personally, my strategy, because after 27 years, I've fallen a lot. I think the first thing is acknowledge it and cry, right? I'm a big crier. I will go home like cry and then go to sleep, wash your face in the morning and keep going, right? That's like because you have to acknowledge it. Like you don't gloss over it, don't pretend it didn't happen, acknowledge it, sit in it, but don't dwell. I think the second thing is to remember that the fact that you failed does not make you a failure. And the third is to look at every failure as a learning opportunity, because success doesn't teach you anything, right? It just confirms how smart you are. But failing lets you know what doesn't work. So once you've cried and washed your face and maybe had some wine, then sit down and really ask yourself, why did it happen? So that it doesn't happen again. And at the end, and then it's tough. It's not an easy thing, but just remember, you failed, you're not a failure, right? It's one moment in a long career. And most of them are not even pivotal, right? It feels like the world is ending, but it's just Tuesday.
It hurts, but you learn from it. And like you said, don't stay there for too long. Just learn from it and then just move on. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Okay, I think that's it. Cynthia, did you want to say any final
No,
words, or we're good?
just thank you for this opportunity. It's been an amazing conversation. So thank you to the panelists. So definitely lots of great gems to take away from there. So yeah, and thank you for your questions that came in as well. I'll hand back to Andrea to wrap up.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone who joined, and thank you again to our lovely moderator and our panelists. So yeah, we've kind of jumped around a great deal here, but just gone from mentors to sister circles, so peer mentoring or peer support, to building your profile even though you really don't want to, dealing with disappointment, examples of how our panelist agencies have come in to help a client where they've gone wrong in the past, and it's the kind of the impact and the value of working with a female-led agency. So as Cynthia said, some great nuggets and some great gems. So thank you again, panelists, for having this conversation. This I will kind of, well, we'll kind of wrap up in a email to everyone who's attended, and kind of obviously share the recording on our LinkedIn and also our YouTube channel. So yeah, we'll leave it there. And those of you who aren't very familiar with Women in Marketing, please kind of connect with me or the organization on LinkedIn and on Instagram, and also on our YouTube channel. And yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye.